Just Daniel chapter 3. You know, it's kind of funny. There's a lot of times that people try and sum up life of what it means in a few kind of good quotes in wisdom. One of those is, life can be summed up in the decisions that you make. And that can be quite true. But if you're like me, who's very indecisive, I don't like that sometimes. Right? Who here is very indecisive? You know, myself, like, the hardest thing every single day is to decide what to eat for lunch. I hate leftovers, so I never want to bring those out, but everything costs more than $5 and I'm broke. So it's like, you know, it's so hard to find something. But more than just those small decisions that we talk about, that's probably not what that quote means, right? It's not like, hey, what you decide to eat for lunch is going to shape your life. That's probably not exactly what they're talking about. See, most of us, if not all of us, will face a time where we have to decide between one of two things. There's not a third option. We have one of two things we have to make that decision. This dilemma may be placed in front of us by others or even by ourselves, or simply we come across it. We wish that there's a third option that we can think our way out of or manufacture, but it doesn't exist. We waste endless amount of time theorizing how we can have the best of both worlds and how we would pay so highly for that option, but it never comes because it doesn't exist. That there's a time in our lives where we either have to choose to walk right or walk left. Choose to quit or to continue. To speak up or stay quiet, it's a black or white option. To choose to have faith or to have fear. In the third lesson in our series, Without Compromise, we're going to actually see that some young men are going to be facing this type of dilemma in their life, where they have a choice. They can't do both. They have to choose whether they're going to have faith or whether they're going to have fear in their life. My title of my lesson this morning in Daniel chapter 3 is Faithful Before All That Is Gold. Come on. Faithful before all that is gold. Point number 1, God over gold. God over gold. So just kind of giving a couple people some summary as we jump into Daniel chapter 3. And if you haven't been with us here in the last couple of weeks, brief history. In about 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Babylonian Empire, has now just conquered Judah, which is kind of like God's nation right there. And you can go back to Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 2 to see that. Following his victory, Nebuchadnezzar brings back with him as he travels back to Babylon some bright and intelligent men from Judah. And his plan is to make them into Babylonians by a culture and 3 years of training so that they can kind of be like foreign ambassadors for him no matter where he conquers. And so in that, we would have read before, there's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were part of this group of bright young men that Nebuchadnezzar had brought back to Babylon, and now he is brainwashing these Jewish captives to now become Babylonians. And so these are the men that we're really going to be looking at today. So in Daniel chapter 2, what happens? Well, we remember that King Nebuchadnezzar, he starts having this dream that was really disturbing him. And Daniel, we didn't really get too much into the dream, but Daniel interprets this dream for him. Pretty much what he does is he perfectly describes the statue that the king saw that had representing different nations. It was the head of gold, and then silver, and then bronze, and then iron and clay, which was representing different nations that were to come. And though this was somewhat of a compliment to King Nebuchadnezzar, right? You're the head of gold. That sounds pretty encouraging. He would have also understood, the king would have also understood that this meant that other sections were going to come. That meant that his kingdom would soon end. In fact, Daniel never explained when the next section was going to come. So there would have been like, yes, oh cool, awesome, I am the head of gold, but there's going to be another thing coming? That would have been what the king would have understood. So as we continue reading in chapter 3, we're going to see the response that the king has to the interpretation of the dream. So right here, verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, that's about 30 meters high, and 6 cubits wide, that's about 2 meters, and set up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officers to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So after hearing this crazy dream from Daniel about what this is going to happen or what God has shown him of the future, the first thing that the king does is set up an image of gold representing his empire. It says here that the whole, he made it out of gold. That doesn't mean that the whole image was made out of pure gold. Normally what they would do back then is that they would make it out of wood or some cheaper material and then paint it gold. So it looked good on the outside, but mainly it was made cheap. And yet, what was he really doing? Well, this thing that he was doing here is that he wasn't just saying like, oh, I just wanted something to represent. This was a straight dedication or straight opposement to God. Because he was saying, hey, I'm not just the head. The whole section is going to be gold. My kingdom is never going to end right here. See, this image was to symbolize that his kingdom would never end. And not only to the people, because the people didn't hear the dream. They didn't know what the king was dreaming. This was to the God of Daniel. See, not everyone knew the dream, but God knew the dream. And so he was going strictly against God. This was a direct opposition to God, that God had shown him time and time again that his kingdom would be crushed. And for me, I kind of looked at this like, well, was this out of just pure arrogance and pride? Or was this out of fear that everything that he knew and that he had worked for, he was just about to lose? That's what I think. Like, maybe he was like, yes, I'm going to be the king. It's going to last forever. Or was he afraid? He's like, dang, I worked hard for this. And now all of it's just going to go away? See, I don't think he's just mean and proud. I think he's actually quite scared. I think some of us can be like that as well. When we work so hard for something in our life, and then we get told that we have to give that up. I don't think some of us are just prideful and going like, no, I'm the God. I make decisions. No, I don't think that's always us. We're just probably scared. We're probably just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm afraid of what is going to happen in the future. And all the things that we now are connected to our purpose that we're called to give up, that's pretty difficult. So many people can, especially in a young age, can go, well, I'm built to go to university. And then university gets shut down and you can't go anymore. Who are you now?
Right, come on.
Their careers. Well, hey, I've been working all my life to get this career, and then you get fired. Who are you? Throughout the last couple of years, many businesses have gone down. We see it on Queen Street, right? It's just like becoming a ghost town in one way or another for small businesses. Who are you now? What are you? I think that's what the king would have been scared about. For all of my life, I've been a king. Take away my kingdom, what am I? In his fear, he does something drastic now. Doesn't just set up the image, but calls a declaration before people. Verse 4 through 6. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, the nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. In his fear, he doesn't just set this up for himself, like, okay, this is cool, this is what I'm going to dedicate. But instead, he calls everyone to start worshiping the image. I think maybe people do that a lot too, like hoping that if enough people worship it, then it becomes true. That if enough people agree, and if I get enough people of one opinion to pat me on the back on what I want, maybe it's going to work out. Maybe it's going to be okay. That if enough people agree, it will be true. But we find out later on that truth is not based off of the majority. Truth is based off of God. Right? It doesn't matter how many people you gather around you to say, oh yeah, what you're doing is okay. It doesn't matter. It's what does God say? And in his demand for everybody to worship, I think there's two things when it comes to this. One, he would have made it very tempting. Not just a threat, but very tempting. First of all, this image would have been very beautiful. 30 meters high, painted gold? Wow, that looks awesome. Even sometimes we can go to like a temple of a religion that we would consider false, but you walk in there and you would still think, man, this is awesome. I don't even know who they're worshiping, but this is a pretty cool place, right? And that's what they would have made them feel like a little bit. Like there's this image of gold, wow, this is great, this is awesome. And then it says that they started to play music. People have always used music to move people's hearts. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a church where usually by the end of the sermon, some random guy like Richie will come up playing guitar, while the pastor's just like, and Jesus is in your heart, do, right? Like, they'll use music in that way as well. And so it would have been beautiful. It would have looked beautiful. It would have sounded beautiful. And then everybody was doing it. All the awesome people that they would have been looking up to, their officials, their prefects, their satraps. We don't know what those mean, but they sound pretty cool, right? We're like, oh, wow, they're bowing down. I think about it even today, right? Have you ever seen like people on runway shows and fashion models and stuff? They're wearing like the weirdest things ever. They got like, kittens on their shoes and like leopard pants and, holding a flamingo. And yet everyone's like, wow, look at him, Will Smith, look at you. It's like, that's what have been happening here. They're like, wow, these guys are bowing down? The people I quote unquote worship are worshiping this? Maybe that's what I should do. I think even people learn how to do that in their lives, is that they make it a talent to find things of this world that oppose God and paint it gold. It's made cheap, but people paint it gold to make it look good.
Wow. Come on, Sean.
And they do that all the time, right? They'll have sin that as a child you would like, I'll never do that. Never, no, that's just disgusting to me. And then you grow up and like it's painted gold now. Makes sin look good. Relationships, how we treat each other, how you view yourself. Makes it look good. One of my favorite rappers though is I forgot his name. Oh, there we go. Chance the Rapper. Chance the Rapper. Sometimes he has some like Christian vibes going on there. But one of the lyrics that he says, I really like. He says, "A new coat of paint doesn't make the stains go away." And that's what the world does. They just put on these layers of paint, layers of gold on these things that it's just like, it's never good. The quality of it's never good. Proverbs 11 verse 22, it says, "Like a gold ring on a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion." Yeah. I remember when I first became a Christian, I used to make songs of this. It's a pig and a ring, a pig and a ring, and a pig. Like literally, I'll walk down the street saying that just to keep my eyes pure. I'm like, yeah, it's just a pig and a ring. God, Satan's just trying to make it look good, but I know it's not right.
Come on, Sean.
And so he does this. He tries to make it tempting. First of all, I want you to bow down because I want you to just, it's awesome. It's good. Be willing to bow down. And for those that wouldn't, he makes a threat. If you don't bow now, you will die. We must all understand and accept that following God is going to come at a cost. 100%. If we don't accept that, we won't really be ready for the times of testing and the fires that we will face. There is a price to pay when you do not bow down to this world. 100%. They're going to persecute you. They're not going to like you. You're not going to get as many doors open for your careers, whatever. If you stand up for your faith truly, it's going to cost you something.
Yeah.
So verse 7, what does it cost them? It says, "Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and people of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." Because of the temptation, because of the threats, as soon as they played the music, as soon as they heard it, they bowed down and were on their knees. Didn't even just miss a beat. As soon as it was played. And that's what the world does as well. They want you to hear it, and as soon as it's different, you bow down. Like, God, I love you. But as soon as your parents say no, you bow.
Wow.
God, you're awesome. I want to worship you. As soon as your other religious friends oppose you, you bow. As soon as your heart says no, you bow. As soon as the other woman or girl in your life or brother in your life or guy in your life says, "Hey, I like you," okay, you bow. Right? It was as soon as it happened. It didn't even miss a beat. But we're going to see that there's some young men who face this difficult decision: bow down to a lie or stand up for a truth and face the consequences. Verse 8 through 15. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever." So people started buying into his lie already. "May he live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, they must fall down and worship the image. And whoever does not fall down and worship the image will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set after the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods, nor worship the image of gold that you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I've made you, very good, awesome. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" So we see here that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were these three young men who faced one of the most difficult decisions you can ever imagine. Disobey God and live, obey God and die. You know, right when the music sounded, they started to notice that everyone, right when it sounded, started to bow down, except three men who stood tall: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The Babylonians were soon finding out that they can change their name, but they couldn't change their heart. They can change their location, but they couldn't change their loyalty. They're like, okay, they brought these people out of Israel, but now they're still standing up for God. And they didn't do it in an arrogant way, right? They didn't have some like anti-gold chat. You're like, we're not bowing down, right? They didn't call others people. They just said, no, this is my decision before God. I don't care what everybody else is doing. I see my other brothers and Jews and other people doing it. That's not me. And to be honest, this can be an easy claim to make when you're away from the king. That's pretty easy. I'm going to stand when the king's not watching. But to do that right in front of the king, that's pretty hard. It's kind of like somebody going like, God above my family. And then your dad starts talking to you. Sorry, what did you say? You're going to put God above me? Oh, that's a difficult conversation now. And that's what these men are brought up here. And it says that here, that they represented all of the Jews, right? In the very first verse, it says that these astrologers were coming to the king to denounce the Jews. In the same way, I think they understood that they represented more than just themselves. All of us have to understand that. If you decide to adopt Christianity and you become a Christian, you're a Christian for everybody. You represent Christianity to everybody. In your home, at your workplace, they're going to be like, well, they're going to be like, well, Christians don't act that way because I know a friend. Right. Christians don't do that because I have a friend that I work with. Right? And the king was furious about this. Not only had Daniel revealed that his dream was actually a nightmare, his kingdom's going to end, but now these three men coming from Israel as well were standing up against him. I think he would have made this personal. It's not just like his kingdom. This would have been personal. They're standing up more than just for themselves. They're standing up for God, who said he's going to destroy his nation. And where was Daniel in all this? Right? This book is called the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 3. Where's Daniel here? Well, it can't be dismissed that maybe people were like, maybe he was bowing down, so therefore he wasn't really, getting attention from the king. Well, that can be dismissed because later on he's willing to risk his life for his faith. So his character wouldn't have changed that much. But what people do think, it's not certain, but maybe because of his just recent promotion in Daniel chapter 2, verse 48 through 49, that maybe he was sent away and he wasn't there. But regardless of where Daniel was, it didn't matter. Even though the leader was gone, they were going to stand up for God. Because that's all that mattered. Sometimes people will only do right things when the leader's watching. When I'm in church, when I'm in this setting. But that didn't matter because they understood that their rock was God. See, in the previous chapter, it talks about the thing that was going to destroy all the nations, all the kingdoms, was going to be a rock. It wasn't going to be painted gold or look silver or majestic or ruby or anything. It was just going to simply be a rock. And that rock was God. And that rock was going to build up the kingdom. And when that is your foundation, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Yeah. When Jesus is your rock, it destroys all the things that are tempting. All the gold before you, the silver, the iron, the bronze, it does not matter. Yeah. See, when you are weak in your knees before what is gold, you don't have Jesus as your rock. We all must come back to the foot of the cross every single time that starts to happen in our life. Because we start thinking about change or the trials I face or repentance, and we get those words in our mind instead of God's sacrifice, His mercy, His grace. We need to re-look at what our foundation of our faith is about. See, Daniel was nowhere in sight, and the Bible didn't even think to mention it because it didn't matter. I think this is awesome. I love that the Bible didn't tell us where Daniel was because it wasn't his moment. It had nothing to do with him. It was their moment. We all have our moment in history where you are going to call to be made to make a stand.
Come on.
It's not going to matter what he's doing or what she's doing or what they say. It's going to be your choice.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all you have. And it's not one where you can make a choice by not making a choice, because that's not an option either. You can't go, well, I'm just going to wait around. That's not an option. You got to make a choice. Either you're going to stand or you're going to bend the knee. You know, and sometimes people think, well, we're only here as a church to keep you strong in the church, a member of the church. No. It's so that you make the right decisions outside of the church. It has nothing to do what songs you sing here. It goes, are you praising God outside? Are you singing with all your heart outside? Are you making the right decisions outside when we're not watching? That's all that matters. And we all have to ask ourselves, if we were these guys, right, what would we do? I don't know, at least for me, I told you previous weeks, I can come up with a lot of excuses in my own heart. You know, if I was in their place, I think I could rationalize how it wouldn't be so bad to just bow down a little bit. You know, I might rationalize, well, hey, every single time I hear the music, I'm just going to tie my shoe. I'm not bowing down. I'm just, it maybe look like I'm bowing down, but I'm just tying my shoe. Maybe I'll go, well, I'll bow down, but I'm not actually going to worship it.
Right.
I'm just doing it for the people around me. On the outside, I'm bowing down, but in the inside, total rebellion. No devotion, right? Maybe I'll bow down once, and then I'll ask God for forgiveness later on. God, just forgive me. You have to understand this is a difficult situation. Maybe we can rationalize it's a foreign land. Well, this is just what they do. I got to follow the customs. Everyone else is doing it. If we ever get to the point where we think that sinning for God is a good idea, think again. We can do that, right? Like, well, hey, I'm just sinning with my other friends so that they might come to church with me tomorrow. Well, that's a horrible idea. The problem is that if we do it once, we're going to do it again. It's never really a one-time situation. We learn and get the habit of bowing down. See, most of our lives, or most of us, are going to have this opportunity or this challenge put before us. We're going to have to face it, and we do not have a redo. That it's not good enough to say, I'm going to do better next time. You only get one chance to stand up for God. We don't always have the privilege of choosing what fires we're going to face and when we're going to face them in our lives. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were people just like us. They probably wanted to live. They were young men. They had hopes and dreams of the future. They probably prayed and thought about, hey, I want to get back to Israel. I want to see it come back again. And they didn't want to die. But they had to face the choice. Bow down to an image or be burnt alive. My first challenge for all of us is that if we're facing this type of challenge before us, that type of fire, that do not back down. Learn to stand up for your faith. Stand up for your continual generosity. Stand up to put God in your life every single day before anything else. Stand up for God and let the gold burn. God before what is gold. We all can be facing those challenges, Christian or not. Make a decision. What do you want? Make that decision for your life. Because where we decide to kneel will determine where we stand when we face judgment. Where we decide to kneel here determines where we will stand when we face judgment later on. Point number 2 is faith your fears. Faith your fears. We all know this, but their decision did not come cheap. Right? And they're going to have to face the fire now. Verse 16 through 18, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, and I think, at least how I envision it, is they all took turns saying one thing. Like, there's Shadrach who first goes up. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Meshach then starts getting some encouragement. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve will be able to deliver us from it and will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Then Abednego, at first he was kind of scared, but now he's like, okay, these guys are doing it. I guess I got to do it too now. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Shadrach and Meshach look at Abednego like, what the heck did you just say? Like, bro, calm down. Right? But like, they would have just been fired up. Like, you couldn't have written a more genuine response of their faith right here. This is just awesome. This is a complete mic drop or horn drop or flute drop, whatever they had back then. Right? These guys said, we are going to serve God no matter what. You know, the God wasn't just like the God that they heard about or that they read about or that their parents knew or anything like that. They're like, this is our God.
Yeah.
This is a God that I serve. You know, it wasn't just a faith of words and thoughts and feelings. It was a faith of actions. They didn't just believe in God, but they believed enough in Him to put their lives on the line. You know, and they made up their minds already. You know, God was enough for them. They said, no matter what happens, God is enough. His salvation was extra. How crazy is that? God was enough and salvation was extra.
Wow.
Miracle or mayhem, my devotion is steadfast.
Wow.
That's awesome. They even say, but even if not, even if we're not saved, what an amazing standard of faith. God, even if you decide not to answer this prayer, it doesn't matter. God, it doesn't matter what you do. God, I have issues in my family's health. It doesn't matter. I know that you are sovereign and you do all things for the good for us. You know, because there is no statistic, to be honest, proving and showing that Christians face sickness less than the faithless. Right? There's no statistic out there. There's no proof on a chart that shows that Christians are protected from financial ruin, that our jobs are secure. There's no statistic like that. Even if you look up in the scriptures themselves, actually it kind of proves opposite the theory. It seems like we go through more trials. It seems like we're put in front of the fires more than anybody else. But it does give us some guarantee. It says you will be loved. You will have grace, you will have meaning, and you will have happy living. But even if all those things, your faith is not based on the outcome, but on the omega. There's not a pros and cons list that you decide to be a servant of God after you figured out it's better living. That, oh, now it's better, I want to do it. No. Is we just do it no matter what. You do it because you know the truth. That the idols of this world are fruitless and vain. They're just painted gold. They're made to attract the eyes, but they do not give you substance. You know, all they offer you is temporary pleasure. You know the truth that there's only one God, and the only God that you serve, that's the one God. And I think that's sometimes what the religious world just don't understand. That these guys, for no reason, were putting their lives on the line. Israel's already been destroyed. They weren't doing this like, I'm going to stand up to the king so that God can see us and bring back... No. It's already been destroyed. It's already gone. They were putting their life on the line for no reason. Just for their faith. The religious world would be all scared to sacrifice things and give up everything. Why should I give up everything? Why should I give up my family? Why should I give up my job? Why should I... They question all these things. But that's something we willingly do all the time. A true servant of God willingly does that all the time. I think about it like, you know, my brother Eric, he's bounced around different mission teams all the time, giving up a job, giving up his life. He could have stayed a Christian in other places. Had nothing to do with that. He would give it up again. You know, I think about our brother Chris. You know, I still think there's a huge part of Chris's heart that's quite still Londoner. Not that he doesn't love New Zealand or anything, but I'm pretty sure by tomorrow, you know, if he can just put on a bow tie, drink some tea, you know, bangers and mash, that would be this guy. But he could have stayed a Christian in London. Yeah. He gave up his job, he gave up his dreams, he gave up all that to come here. Yeah. Right? I think people forget about this. It's not just like you have to sacrifice. I'm willing to do that every day of my life. To give up my job, to give up that, you think that's a cost? That's something that's just, it's painted gold for me. Wow. It doesn't matter. What mission team are you excited to go on?
Come on.
When we go on that mission team, you have a choice. You can stay here and still remain a Christian. 100%. Right? Nothing bad about your faith. But what's awesome is that we all go, I'm willing to sacrifice everything anytime.
Yeah.
And we talk about Fiji, Tonga, Wellington. I'm not only talking to the islanders. I came here and people still hear my American accent. I've been here for 3 years, right? I had no reason coming this way. Same way, when we go to Tonga, who else is just going to stand up? Are we going to have little Chinaman Barry running around? Right? Yeah, apparently there's a lot of Chinese in Tonga. But that's what the religious world doesn't get. It's not just a sacrifice. I give it up every day.
Yeah.
I give it up every day. See, they didn't just face their fears, they faithed their fears. It wasn't about just being brave for them. It was all about God. The only reason they were doing this is because they had faith. Delivered or devoured, I'm going to face the fire. Delivered or devour, we are called to face the fire. See, what do we do when we have to have faith as we are tested by fire? Well, the thing is, I want you to encourage you, is believe in the truth rather than the facts. What I mean by that is the facts that they had before them. The king was angry. The fire is hot. Everyone that gets thrown into the fire is going to die, and I don't want to die. Those are the facts that they had. The truth that they had, though, nothing can they see, but God would deliver them.
Yeah.
If not, they're going to go to heaven. It is better to obey God than disobey. That is a truth that they knew. Let's continue reading, verse 19 through 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated even 7 times harder than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and has asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." I think even coming closer and closer to this point, it would have been hard to face the king. It would have been hard to hear him shouting, "Hey, burn the furnace, get it over there, get the strongest men to tie them up." I would have think if I was these 3 guys, I would have had a lot of feeling in my heart. Dang, are we really doing this? That was fun to say it all then, but you sure we can't just bow one time? Did they say their goodbyes? There would have been a moment when they were getting tossed in, that they would have just had all this fear. This is just this doubt. What's happening? And then they hit the bottom of the furnace, the floor of the furnace, and then it's just peaceful. I think, and maybe it would have been like us when we get when we're getting disciplined by our parents. I don't know if you do that, but you already tense up before the hit already hits. Probably that's what they're doing in the fire. And then nothing's happening? Maybe we just died really quick. Maybe we're just in heaven, right? And they start looking around. There's Jesus there, so maybe. Right? And they realize, wow, God just delivered us. They start opening one eye. They don't want to know if it's going to burn or not, right? They start to see, wow, God delivered us. I think forever, God looks down at them and goes, this is going to be an example of faith forever and ever. And now today, we even get to understand it. And the king, how does he react? Well, he talks about God a little bit. He says, "You guys serve the God of the Most High." He knew God. But all those that know God outside the fire don't truly know God in the fire. You can only truly know God when you face the fire.
Come on, John.
You can only truly know God when you are in the fire, not outside. Because they were bound going into the fire, but the fire burned up all their ropes and all the things that tied them down. Sometimes we think like, wow, this challenge is so hard. The challenge is your deliverance. That challenge is actually to help you to learn how to put God first in your life. That challenge is there to help you to get idols out of your life. We think the challenge is there just to like test and everything. No, the challenge is to free you. The challenge is to help you. My last challenge for all of us is learn how to faith your fears. Not just look at the facts and how difficult it is, but to actually believe in God and know what He's going to do. Because there is an element of faith that can literally choke out the life of all your fears. If you just learn how to faith your fears. You know, today, later on, we may not have this decision before us. Right? We may not have this decision. We may just have to decide what we're going to eat for lunch after the service. But there are going to be times where we have to make this kind of decision. That if we're going to decide to follow God or not. That if we're going to stand up to our families. That we're going to stand up to people around us. That we're just going to jump in the fire. It may not be today, but one day you will have to make that decision.